Hello, I'm Will. I'm a biologist, and when I get bored at work, I ask the internet random questions. Usually, these questions serve no purpose other than to just amuse me. But I thought I would analyse these questions like I would actual scientific data. I take this data and I create figures with it. The only difference between these figures and the ones that I might make at work are that these ones are absolutely useless. Today we're going to be delving into a very important question, and that is, what are people's favourite days of the week, and what informs those choices? I love people. I think they're absolutely fascinating. I think the little differences in people's perspectives are what I find the most fascinating about people, and it's the little things like our favourite days of the week, the particulars that people have, and how that helps them formulate a favourite day of the week and their overall preference. Just love what goes into making that decision. And I do think we all have our preferences, no matter what, we all do have a favourite day of the week. Something we look forward to, be it the weekend, be it clocking off on a Friday, being a fresh start on a Monday, But this does come from the perspective of someone who works just a regular 9 to 5, I don't work in retail, also known as fucking hell, so I am actually allowed to look forward to things. And because I want to find out what these particulars are and why people like certain days of the week over others, I asked Reddit what their favourite day of the week is and why. I would like to go through the stats just to show you the kind of analytics that come with a post like this. So at the time of writing and recording, this post was seen 23,000 times, and I'll break down how many people from what parts of the world were viewing this post. So 34.3%, that's about 7,800, were in the UK. 26.3%, that's about 6,049, were from the US. 4.5%, that's about 1,035, were from Canada. And the rest were made up by people all over the world. This post was upvoted 9 times at a rate of 8%, it got shared 8 times and commented on 108 times in total. So I decided to approach this like I would an actual experiment that I perform at work, and one thing that all experiments have in common is that they should have a hypothesis or a research question, and so I hypothesized that Friday would be the day that people mention the most, and that Monday would be the day that people mention the least. And we'll get into why as we go through the video. So I want to kick things off by showing you the sentiment analysis that I did, which included all the comments in the thread. Now, a graph, when you first look at it, can be quite intimidating, so I'm just going to kind of give you a running commentary of this graph to explain the things that I look for as a scientist, and these usually make it more digestible, and I think it helps when you've got points of interest to look at. So I'll walk you through it. Now, first thing I'm looking at are my x-axis and my y-axis. So our x-axis, that's the bottom, that is our sentiment score. It usually ranges between -1 and +1 for a sentiment analysis. These are the absolute maximums, and we can see that's the case here. We've got a -1 and a 1 on the x-axis, and there are bars in both of those. So our y-axis, that's the left-hand side, that's our frequency that a sentiment occurred. So we can see that from the bottom to the top of our y-axis, the one on the left, we can see that the numbers go up, and the bar height corresponds to that. So that big bar in the middle is 0.0. That occurs the most because, on average, neutral sentiment scores occur the most. I also look at the highest and lowest values, those 1s and -1s at either end of the left or right of the graph. This gives me an idea of the spread of the data, so what are the extremes, and it gives me something to kind of poke at later on. And we talked about the highest bar being that one in the middle, the neutral bar. I also look to see where the lowest bars are occurring, and it looks like to the left of the tallest bar, we're seeing some of the shortest bars, 0.5, some between that looks like 0.25, and then that -1 as well. I also look where the most bars are appearing, or the most bars which are the tallest are appearing, just to see how things are clustered. And there is a pretty pronounced cluster to the right of the middle bar, so that tells me that there's a lot of sort of middling to low positive sentiment occurring quite frequently. And that gives me an idea of how this is going to affect some of the stats of the data. So you could imagine that the mean of this data, the average of this data, will be slightly positive, And that's because you're seeing a lot of high bars on the right, so in the positive end of the sentiment score, and you're not seeing as many toolbars on the left. So it suggests that, if you were to add all these bars up and divide by how many there are, then the overall sentiment score is going to be slightly positive because you just don't see that heavy clustering on the left side of the neutral bar. And this is the case, so when you actually work out the average sentiment score is 0.1416086. So it does make this dialogue on a whole a positive one, which I think is lovely. And the highest and lowest values were obviously +1 and -1 respectively. So this does give us a pretty good idea of what the dialogue looks like as a whole, but this does include replies. Replies to the original thread comments could actually skew the results, because the replies may have been tangential content, like stories and jokes, that don't actually answer the question itself. We saw this before in the last video, so I am going to do another sentiment analysis here, but I'm not going to include all the comments. I'm just going to look at the original replies to the question that I asked. And you might be wondering, well, Will, original comments can be anecdotes and jokes too. They could also skew the sentiment analysis, so it's no more valid than this. And to you I say, shut up. Shut the fuck up right now. So we have another histogram before us. We're going to look at the same features that I walked you through before. So we're looking at the x-axis and the y-axis. And off the bat, I can already tell that this dialogue is going to be slightly positive, even without the stats, just because there are more bars to the right of the neutrality bar in the middle. And when we look at the spread of the data, we can see it's completely different. We don't get the highs and lows that we did when we included all the comments. We can see that, there looks to be a middling sentiment value at the highest, somewhere around, probably 0.4, 0.6 maybe. And we see the negative side of things that there is a -0.2, which is nowhere near our -1. So this does suggest that things aren't as negative, but it also suggests that they're not as positive either. Also, the numbers on the y-axis are much different. You notice we were seeing 30s and 20s on the y-axis on the previous graph. Here we're seeing 9s, maybe 12s at a max. So this does mean that the average sentiment score is going to be lower because of this. And that is the case, so 0.05221512 is our new mean. And I could round that down, but I don't fucking care. So our lowest value was actually -0.2, and the highest was 0.3 recurring, so not even as high as I imagined. So this means that the wider discussion, rather than just the original replies, was actually more positive than this was. And I do think that's lovely. I want these posts to foster some kind of discourse that is good, and foster pleasant discussions. I think we could all agree that more of that is needed on the internet. So I've broken down all the answers into individual words and ranked how frequently the top 50 occur. So we're going to look at the top 50 words first with replies, and then we're going to look at them without to see how the dialogue changes before and after. So we've got a similar histogram here, but there are a few differences, and I'll walk you through them. So our frequency is the same on our y-axis. That's no different from the previous two graphs we've seen, but on our x-axis, we don't have numbers, we have words. And you'll notice that there is also a difference in colours within this plot. So here, the taller and more brown that a bar is, that means it got said more, and vice versa for the smaller, more yellow bars. We get some toolbars that kind of are associated with the question, words that don't really tell us much, but you can imagine that they take centerpiece in people's answers, because without these words, the answer just wouldn't make sense. Those are words like day, week, don't, I'm, sounds, time. They're not really telling of any particular theme, but we do get some words which give us insights into reoccurring themes. Words like weekend, kids, games, hate and love, which are mentioned an equal amount of times, which I think is quite a thing, parks, and parenting. These all suggest what people might be doing on certain days or times of the week, and what informs people's choices when they answer this question. People might like or dislike the weekend because they have to spend more time with their kids or less time with their kids. They might get to play video games or walk their dogs at the park. Finally, we can look at the actual days of the week, in the order that they appear from highest to lowest. Coming in at the highest, we get Friday. I'll even include the plural version, Fridays too, which occurs, but even without this, it occurs the most. We have Sunday, then Monday. We also get Mondays, the plural form, Thursday, Saturday, also get Saturdays here, then Wednesday, and then Tuesday doesn't even get a spot on the top 50 list, which I think is fucking criminal. So if you were to take this at face value, right, and you say, okay, the more that a word appears, that means that people like it more, then we could say that by far and away, Friday is the favourite, followed by Sunday, then Monday, and so on and so forth. We could summarise that people fucking hate Tuesday by its absence on this list, which I do think is too harsh. However, I don't think this is the case. Can we really think that people like Sundays and Mondays that much? Arguably two of the shittest days to ever burrow into the fabric of existence. One is the dreaded first day of the working week, and the other is the foreplay to it. This is a good lesson to learn that as scientists, we also need to consider the context behind our data and not just take it as face value. This is especially true when working with data like this, which is a very small sample size and is difficult to analyse statistically. I mean, at least it is for me because I'm not a social scientist, I'm a biologist. Anyway, that's enough unguided conjecture from me, so let's look at the same word ranking, but for the data that didn't include replies to the original comments. So now we're going to take a look at the 50 most used words without the replies. Just straight fucking raw dog in the post. Again, we still get the toolbars that correspond to generic, nondescript terms here like day, I'm, deleted, boy. We do get some more thematic words that give us ideas about what people like about certain days. Weekend, people obviously love the weekend because they don't need to work. Home, some people may just want to be at home more and they prefer the weekend, or they work from home on certain days. Start, some people may love the fresh start of a week. I definitely fucking don't. Kids, again, people may want to spend less or more time with their kids, and that might inform their choice in the matter. Cook makes an appearance, and I think that's really interesting because people may like weekends more because they get to cook a bit more and spend more time into the meals that they make. And I certainly relate to this because I do love cooking, but you know, after an 8-hour stretch in the office or the lab, I just want convenient, wholesome food and, you know, to get to my Xbox or my fucking bed so I can watch TV. So finally, let's look at the days of the week and how frequently they occur again. So Friday and Fridays occurs the most, which does track. People love it. Monday and Mondays, which has surpassed Sunday, and I find this surprising. And when I say surpass, I mean it in the sense that it surpassed it relative to the word count with all comments and not just the original replies. Then again, we have Sunday, Thursday, Saturday and Saturdays. Saturdays after Thursdays is surprising. We have Wednesday, and again, not a single mention of Tuesday, which is quite shocking. So, settle the score on which days get mentioned the most, both in the comments that were replying to my original question and when all comments are included. I've made this graph here. So I've based the colours on a very cursory search, and I've been fed my slop by my big AI father, and I'm now regurgitating my slop into your mouth brain like a mother bird sustaining its children. So there's no universal set of colours associated with days of the week, but we went on the cultural and traditional colour associations of the AI summary from Google. Yeah, anyway, we've got fucking Sunday, which is pink, Monday, which is white or light blue, Tuesday, red or pink, Wednesday, green, Thursday, yellow or orange, Friday, light blue, white or pink, take your pick, Saturday, black, dark blue or purple. So this is the Vedic astrology. This system connects each day with a ruling planet and a corresponding colour, often influencing the colour choice of clothing or rituals. Anyway, back to the graph. I've not included the plural forms of the words here because that doesn't necessarily mean that people are citing those as their favourite days of the week. They could just be using those days to frame their actual favourite day. You know, you can imagine people being like, well, Mondays are quite shit and, you know, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays are all fucking awful, so my favourite day of the week is Friday. And, you know, I can already hear you saying, well, the non-plural form of those days of the week could also be used in that context. And, you know, to you, I just say, when you grow up and become a scientist, you can then make your fucking YouTube video in the way that you want to make it. But until then, I'm in fucking charge. So let's break this down. Friday had the most mentions in both cases with 28 and 23, followed by Sunday with 13 and 10. Then it's Monday with 12 and 10. Then Thursday with a static 10, followed by, and I can't fucking believe this, Saturday at 9 and 7, which is fucking mental. Saturday is a divine gift from the big man himself. Penultimate placement goes to Wednesday at a constant 5, which means that last placement goes to Tuesday at 2. So we'll start off with the most upvoted comment, and that is Saturday. No work at all. no Sunday scaries. Friday's a close second as I work from home, so log off knowing that I have a long stretch of no work again. And guess what? I'm already at home, so I can quite literally put my feet up and relax. And we also get one here that says all of them. If I'm lucky enough to wake up in the morning, I get to have another go at this thing called life, which I do think is quite philosophical. Maybe that's a mindset I'll grow into. So Thursday, hands down, all the promise and anticipation of the weekend, but without any of the disappointment. I don't agree with this. I mean, I agree with Thursday's up there, but it's all the promise and anticipation of the weekend. You've still got another day, and without any of the disappointment. Like, yeah, sometimes you can be demotivated when you don't do anything all weekend or nothing goes to plan, but you know, you still have a weekend, you know. You could still be like, okay, people cancel on me, I'm going to the fucking cinema, you know. I think it's what you make it, or, you know, I'm going to make a really nice dinner. And then we have yesterday, because all my troubles felt so far away. And then we have the kind of innate whatever happens to be my day off at work that week. Shout out to all the shift workers of all industries. Yeah, it's pretty rough. I know this question kind of falls out the window if you work in a non 9-to-5 job. And we get one's quite nice. I'm a stay-at-home dad, so every day is pretty great. Monday is probably the worst, due to the fact that I have to tidy up from the weekend, but couldn't pick a favourite day. And I think that's quite nice. Yeah, we get another Friday, start work later on Saturday, so I can go to the pub Friday night. Fridays at work tend to be busy enough for it to be fun, but not so busy as I want to kill myself. I also start work later on Friday, so I have plenty of time in the morning to play some video games, go to the gym, put some slap on before I go to work. I wake up very happy every Friday. That's nice. Work-wise, I actually like Monday, refreshed. My job is chilled on a Monday, goes quick. Conversely and oddly, I work 8 till 1:30 on Fridays and live 5 minutes from work, so I usually can be home changed in my local with my friends by about 2 o'clock. But the 5.5 hours sat in work drags so badly. I hate it. Again, another one Thursday, hands down, all good stuff still to come. I kind of get this more. Now here's one that's quite interesting. I keep a mood tracker where I rate each day 1 to 5. Saturdays are clear ahead of every other day, likely mostly because I'm doing something fun and no work on the doorstep yet. Next up, Sunday, Friday and Monday are all pretty closely tied in that order. Friday and Sunday are both nice, but I'm often tired from work or from going out the night before, so that makes it take a hit. And Mondays are slightly lower as I'm back in work and it is very chill at my office on Monday. Tuesdays and Thursdays come in tied next, and Wednesday is significantly lower than all, likely because it's the midpoint slump of work and the type of work I have to do on Wednesdays. So for me it seems to follow a sort of wave pattern. I think that's really interesting. I would also try and rate my days for the purpose of a video, just to see what this is like, but I'm worried that might bias it, because I'll maybe feel certain ways to confirm my initial hypothesis, you know. If I say, oh, I'm gonna hate Mondays, maybe I'll have that preconceived idea in my head that I should hate Mondays and bias it, so I think I'll abstain from that. Sunday. It's the one day of the week that I'm guaranteed to be able to spend time at home with my wife and son. I work alternative Saturdays, so every other Saturday is also great. If I have the Saturday off, then I work a late shift on the Friday, which means I get to spend the morning with my boy while his mum works a half day. Then we switch. Basically, any day I get to spend being a husband and dad rather than being a worker drone. I think that's absolutely lovely, and that's the whole reason that I ask questions like this. So just going off this, my hypothesis is false. Whilst Friday was indeed the most popular day, Monday was not. It was Tuesday, which is fucking mental. So I thought I'd round off my hypothesis with some final thoughts and my ranking. So we'll go from lowest to highest. So Monday is obviously shite. You're being dropped back into the working week when you've just had a blissful weekend. So yeah, well, there's not much to say there. So Sunday's a bit of a whirlwind for me. It's a blissful morning. It turns into that bit of time when you know that you're gonna fucking vomit, but then you're just waiting for it to happen. Except the vomit is your labour and the toilet is the workplace. Then it's Wednesday, which is sound because you're halfway through. You know, it could always be worse. Tuesday is a victory because I think Monday's behind you. You know, bye-bye Omaha Beach, hello Carentan. And then it's Thursday, Friday Eve. It's great because, you know, on some weeks this is basically a Friday if you're having a slow one or it's close to Christmas. And if it isn't, you know, who gives a fuck? It's nearly Friday. Then it's finally Friday. You can't say much about it. Then it's Saturday. This is your canvas and, you know, your Andy Warhol with a tin of chicken soup and a fucking mountain of cocaine that makes Mont Blanc look like a pile of flour. So there you have it. My initial hypothesis was still wrong. People did not in fact hate Monday the most. And I saw some valid reasons. I did also see maybe a bit of a case for Thursday, with everything good yet to come, but I still think my favourite day of the week is going to be one of those days where the good things are happening, rather than the preamble to it. So yeah, thank you. Hopefully you've learned something, and maybe thought that science is a bit more demystified than what it was before. I make these videos mainly to showcase why I love people and their little responses and why I think they're interesting, but also to give you a little bit of perspective on what goes on as a scientist. You know, I feel like people in science get portrayed as, you know, big bad, or, you know, enabling things like big pharma and all these talking points that you see a lot in the news today, irrespective of their end on the political spectrum. And, you know, hopefully you can see that we're not like that. We're usually people who love science, love doing interesting work, but also who love people as well. That's the science I know and why I get into it. So thanks for looking at my useless figures. I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks.